What I want to talk to you about today, though, is the rhythm of rest. Let me get this working. Now, I've been told, and I'm not an archer, but I've been told by archers that the unstrung bow is a symbol of strength. Because if you keep the bow unstrung, when you do string it and bend it, then it has more power to utilize. If you always kept the bow bent, eventually it would get weaker and weaker. Actually, it would break. But if you let it go slack, when you need to use it, it's more fit and ready to use. I think people are like that. We need to get unstrung once in a while, don't you think? We sometimes get so uptight, and sometimes we need to get a little unstrung. And we can't remain bent all the time. Have you ever had a time in your life when your life was less life and more just an existence? You were so busy. Now, my glasses are fogging up, and I apologize for this, but my glasses are fogging up, and I can't see you, and I can't speak to people I can't see. So more and more your calendar gets fuller, and your days get filled up, and days go by like a blur. And God comes by and he says, I have an antidote for you. I have an antidote for your life. For those workaholics in this world. For those who think their value is based upon what they accomplish. For those who are always trying to figure out how to fulfill the rat race of this life. Jesus says, I have given you my Sabbath. That is my solution. That is my antidote. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. And so you can grab your Bibles, you can turn over to Exodus 20 or your devices or your phones or whatever you look your scriptures up in. Exodus 23 to 17. And while you are turning there, let me start by making 3 observations concerning the Sabbath that I think will help us build up the value of the Sabbath in our lives. This first observation I would make is about the placement of the Sabbath within the 10 Commandments, the placement of the Sabbath. I don't believe, talking about the Sabbath, I really enjoyed the Sabbath school this morning, and I didn't realize how closely the Sabbath commandment and the commandment to honor our father and mother were tied together. That was very enlightening this morning for Sabbath school, and I appreciated that very much. But we're talking here the Sabbath commandments and its placement, because I believe when I heard that, it reminded me the commandments, they're not just thrown together. They're well designed. They're well placed. They're designed by our God. They're not haphazard structured. The order is not by accident. God intentionally put the first commandment first because it's the most important commandment. For us to always have no other gods before God. That's the most important place to start when we're thinking about the commandments, how to live a Christian life. And so the placement of the Sabbath commandment, too, is purposeful. And we can see this by noticing 2 facts. First of all, we'll notice the Sabbath is located in the center of the commandments geometrically. Now, the Fourth Commandment comprised in the Hebrew of 55 words, and it's situated between the 67 words of the first 3 commandments and the 41 words of the last 6 commandments. In addition, this commandment contains almost half of the words in the Hebrew of the rest of the commandments. 55 words compared to 108 words in the rest of the commandments. So it's obviously the largest and more central commandment in its significance. Secondly, the Sabbath commandment is located in the center of the commandments thematically. As you know, the first 3 commandments involve what? A relationship with God, right? Our vertical relationship. And the last 4 commandments contain our relationship with man, horizontally. And the Sabbath lies between these 10 commandments, 6 and you'd say 3, with the 4th commandment right in the center geometrically. The Sabbath functions as this bridge between these 2 themes. And you know how Jesus said the greatest commandment is what? Love your God with all your heart. And what else? Love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments hang all the commandments. So Jesus obviously understood the 10 commandments. They hang on these 2, love God and love man. And the Sabbath commandment right there. In fact, you could say the Sabbath is the bullseye of the 10 commandments. The second observation I would make has to do with the purpose of the Sabbath. And there are two things I want to notice when I talk about the purpose of the Sabbath. And the first has to do with rhythm. Now, if you're in Exodus 20, just turn back, just page back to Genesis. And in Genesis 1, we see that God creates the world, right? And at Genesis 1:31, he says, and God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was what? Very good. And then in Genesis 2, he goes on to say, God said everything was very, very good. And he goes on to say that Genesis 2, 1-3, so the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Thus the heavens and the earth and all the hosts of them were finished. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. Then God did what? He blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested for all the work which he had created and made. Now, when you go back to Genesis 20, which we had our fingers in a few moments ago, when you go back to 20, where the fourth commandment is given, as God gives it in the Sabbath commandment in verses 8 to 11, he refers in Exodus 28 to 11, he refers back to these verses that we just read in Genesis. He says, remember to observe the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days a week are set apart for your daily duties, regular work. But the seventh day is a day of rest dedicated to your Lord God. Why? On that day, no one in your household may do any kind of work. This includes you and your sons and your daughters and your males, female servants, your livestock, and any foreigners among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and earth. There he is quoting that Genesis that we just looked at. Made the heavens and earth and the sea and everything that's in them, and he rested on the seventh day. That is why God blessed the Sabbath day and he set apart. What's my point? My point is the reason why God says people are to work 6 days and take the seventh off is not an arbitrary reason. God just didn't come up with this idea. He didn't just create an abstract concept. The reason why is because this is how God made our world. This is how God designed the world. Here's the deal. Any teaching about God that is random and arbitrary is nothing but religion. It's not really about God. It's just religion. And I don't know if we want to just do religion. We want to avoid that kind of stuff, ritual and religion. What we want is to have a relationship with God. But the reason why God says we have to remember the Sabbath has nothing to do with ritual, has nothing to do with just religion. It's because God says you remember the Sabbath holy because somehow it's integral to how God made this world. 6 and 1. 6 and 1. Because God created this pattern which will live according to how the universe was made. There's a pattern, there's a rhythm to life. God says 6 and 1, 6 and 1, not for some abstract old religious idea, but because of God's, as the creator, how he created things, how he designed things, how he wove the universe together. Because there's a big difference between religion and walking in the way of God and how he created the world. There's a big difference. Because this is rooted in how things are, in the fabric of God's design. He didn't make some arbitrary whimsical rule. He desires us to live according to how things are. 6 and 1, 6 and 1. In my early 20s, I thought, I would love to play the drums. So my friends had us drums. I played the guitar, and he had drums, and we were trying to put a group together. You know how you are in the 20s, you know. Everybody wants to be in a group. And so we had our guitar. We made a lot of noise. But I said, you know, I want to play the drums. So I sit down on the drums one day, and I grabbed the sticks there, and I started hitting the drums. And I loved hitting the drums. It made a lot of noise. But you know what it sounded like? It sounded like somebody who had an armful of wood and metal in their arms, and they tripped down the steps and dropped it all. That's how it sounded. It wasn't very pleasant to the ears. Because all I did, I thought if I had the two crucial components, a stick and drums, I could play. But I quickly realized there's a third crucial component in playing the drums that I did not possess. You need rhythm. Rhythm is knowing when to play and when not to play, right? When to be on and when to be off. When to be playing and when to rest. Rhythm is knowing that. So rhythm is learning when to be on and when to be off. That's an important distinction. And it makes a difference between coherent sound and nothing but just noise. Which is the same principle, Pat, I think you know, when you play the piano. When you get up on that piano and you're playing the piano, there's certain keys to play, but if all you do is grab the piano and run your fingers all over there and always play notes constantly, it sounds like what? Chaos. There's no coherent music coming out, right? You have to know when to rest. Rests are placed, notes are there, the length of the notes are there, and you need to understand when to rest and when to play. The difference between noise and music is knowing when to be on and when to be off. Do we know that in life? So the purpose of Sabbath is all wrapped up in that idea. We need to know when to cease. In fact, the very meaning of the Sabbath is to cease or to rest. That's the very meaning of what it literally means to have the Sabbath. Sabbath is a day of rest. And God says the seventh day is to rest, not for some arbitrary reason, but because, as Jesus said, the Sabbath was made to benefit you, to benefit how I created you, how I made you, how the whole universe was created. It's made to benefit you, not you to benefit the Sabbath. Its purpose is for you. It's designed for you. God's rhythm in your life. Every seventh day, you need to physically, emotionally, spiritually recharge your batteries, because your batteries will run out if you don't. The second thing I want to notice concerning the purpose of Sabbath deals with relationships. The Sabbath has to do not just with rhythm, but the Sabbath has to do with relationships. Turn over to Exodus 5:10, just a couple verses back, Exodus 5, verse 10. And the Israelites there are seen as slaves in Egypt. And as they are slaves in Egypt, Moses is trying to talk to the Pharaoh, and he's trying to allow them to get out of Egypt to go and worship at the mountain. He says, can we please worship God? And Pharaoh sees no value in getting these slaves any time off to go worship. And so that's when we pick up there in verse 10. So the slave drivers and the foremen inform the people, Pharaoh has ordered us not to provide straw for you. Verse 11, go and let yourselves, get it yourselves. Find it wherever you can. You must produce as many bricks as before. So the people scattered throughout the land searching for straw. The slave drivers, verse 13, were brutal. Meet your daily quota of bricks, just as you did before, they demanded. Then they whipped the Israelite foremen in charge of the work crews. Why haven't you met your quotas, either yesterday or today, they demanded. So the Israelite foremen went to Pharaoh and pleaded with him, please don't treat us like this. They begged. We've been given no straw, but we are still told to make as many bricks as before. We are beaten for something that isn't our fault. It is the fault of your slave drivers for making such unreasonable demands. But Pharaoh replied, you're just lazy. You obviously don't have enough to do. If you did, you wouldn't say, let us go so we can offer sacrifices to the Lord. So he says, no straw will be given, verse 17, but you must deliver the regular quota of bricks. Now get back to work. You see, if you're an Israelite, making bricks is your life. That's what you do. You get up at the crack of dawn and you go make bricks until it's dark. That's your value. You do it every day, day in and day out. You make bricks and stack them. Make bricks and stack them. It sounds like a great life, right? Not. Can you imagine? Every single day. And here's the deal. You see, if you're a slave and you work for Pharaoh, to Pharaoh, the value of your life is based upon how many bricks you can make, right? How valuable you are is what you can produce. Your entire value is on how much you can produce. Now go back to Exodus 20 and look at verse 1 in Exodus 20, where we find the commandments. By the time you get to where the commandments are given, here in Exodus 20, verse 1, Israelites have already come out of Egypt. They're not in Egypt anymore, right? They've come out. They're at Mount Sinai, and where the Ten Commandments are given, and they've come out of slavery. They've come out of ignorance, and God restates his law in an attempt to put some things in perspective for his people. Listen to how God starts, verse 1. And God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Have you ever heard that the Ten Commandments, especially the Sabbath Commandments, is all legalistic? It's a legalistic thing. It's something you do because you think you're going to get saved by somehow by keeping that day. Then they call it legalism. But here we find out that the Sabbath commandment, when it was given, grace had already been extended, right? When it was reinstated, grace had already been extended by God to the Israelites. He had already brought them out of the land of Egypt. He had already brought them out of darkness into light, out of bondage and slavery into freedom. The Ten Commandments begin by God reminding them of his grace and his mercy that's already been bestowed on them, and how their value as people were wrapped up in the fact that not by what you produced, but by the fact that I freed you from Egypt, that I freed you from all this slavery that you were involved in. And then God begins to put some other things in perspective. And the first word God uses in the Fourth Commandment is what? Remember. He says, remember. It's clear. God's not instituting a Sabbath here. He's reminding him of this. Remember. Remember to what? Remember to observe the Sabbath because I have set you apart as holy. Why? Because 6 days I created the heavens and earth and sky and sea and everything in them. And then on the seventh day I rested in the joy of having made it all. In other words, the Sabbath is all about a relationship between God, the creator, and us, the creature. It's that purpose that he places in life. He sustains, he made us, he sustains us, he gives us life, he gives us purpose in life, he gives us a rhythm in our life. 6 and 1, because that's how he made the universe. He wants us to have a life that's more about knowing him than about what we produce. That's more about our relationship and his love for us and our love for him than about what we make and produce and what we do. It's more about what he did than what we do. That's what he wants us to understand. Observe the Sabbath day. Now, if you turn over to Deuteronomy chapter 5, that's where the Ten Commandments is given again. Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 to 15. And it's repeated all over again, and you kind of wonder why. If he already gave it, why would you repeat it? But I think there's a reason, because you'll hear some distinction between the first time it was given and the second time. It starts out with, remember to, just like it did in Exodus, to observe the Sabbath because I have set apart. It says, observe the Sabbath to keep it holy as the Lord your God commanded you. 6 days you should labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God, and in it shall do no work. That sounds the same, doesn't it? There's the rhythm of the 6 and 1. Here's the difference. Remember that you were a slave in Egypt, in the land of Egypt. You were a slave, and the Lord brought you out from there by the mighty hand and by the outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath. So in Exodus, you remember the Sabbath because he created the heavens and earth. But here in Deuteronomy, remember the Sabbath because remember you were a slave and God brought you out of Egypt. The Israelites were slaves. And what did they do when they were slaves? Remember, they made what? Bricks. Bricks are their life. They gave you value. The more you produce, the more you're worth. So they created value. And if they stopped making bricks, they had less value. In fact, if you could not make any bricks, you had no value. So God is saying, I freed you from that. I freed you from thinking your life is about what you do. I freed you from thinking your life is about what you produce. I freed you about thinking that your life is only an existence. I gave you value. I brought you out. I chose you. I brought you out. I love you. It comes from the fact that I made you and I redeemed you. Therefore, you're a child of God, and that is why you're valuable. You're my child. You're created and redeemed. I've not only made you, I bought you, and that gives you value in itself. Egypt, you see, is about slavery. It's about sin. Slavery is sin, and God brings us out of that sin. He gives us freedom, and he says, understand, it's not about what you do, it's about what I accomplished for you. God says, remember the Sabbath day, and I remind you, I'm your Redeemer. I'm your Redeemer and your Creator. Here's the deal. The Redeemer can only redeem. Why? Because he's the Creator. He could not redeem if he was not the Creator. Isn't that true? The reason why he can redeem us is because he created us. And the Sabbath is all about that. It reminds us of this relationship, brings us back to that rhythm. Due to circumstances beyond our control, we are the creatures, and he's the Creator. Due to circumstances beyond our control, the seventh day is a Sabbath, and you can't change it. It's part of the fabric of the universe. It's how the universe was made, and it's part of the rhythm that God calls us to in our life. Let me ask you a question. When God calls you into a relationship, can you see a relationship? Can you see relationships really can't be tested scientifically, can they? They can't be really totally observed because they're almost invisible. A relationship is when you love somebody. Can you see love? Well, someone says love is a warm feeling. Well, I got that when I turned the heat on today. So what is it? What is that love? Well, love is a relationship. Relationships are really invisible and intangible, and that's why we use symbols to signify relationships. In many places, many people use what? A wedding ring to symbolize a relationship, or an engagement ring to symbolize a relationship, right? They use something to symbolize this relationship. Why? Because relationships can't be seen, and they want people to notice that I'm married, or notice I've been engaged, or notice I have this relationship. Why am I talking about this? It's because it kind of leads to my third and last observation. The Sabbath is a symbol or a sign of our relationship with God. God realized that relationships are invisible, and God is invisible. And how would people know if we have a relationship with God? He says, I want to give you a symbol or a sign. I want to give you this thing like a ring on your finger to represent marriage. I want to give this sign about this relationship between you and I. Symbols provide that tangible evidence for the intangible things, such as relationships. And the Bible's full of these types of symbols. And let me just give you three before we close. Just three simple examples from Scripture of how symbols provide this tangible evidence of something that's intangible. Remember in Genesis 9, 11 to 14? What happened then? The flood, right? Now, how many times had it rained before the flood? It hadn't rained at all, right? Never rained. I mean, can you imagine building a boat when it had never rained? That takes a lot of faith, right? It never seen rain. Zero. And then, after the flood, what do you think Noah did? As soon as he saw a cloud in the sky, what do you think he did? he headed back to the ark, right? Just a cloud. A dark cloud would send me back. Wouldn't it send you back to the ark? I mean, after you've seen what the flood did. And so God said, because I love you, I want you to not be I don't want you to live in fear. I want you to live in confidence. I want you to know that you and I have this relationship together. And so he says, I'm going to give you a sign. And what's that sign he gave? He said the promise he gave was the rainbow he put in the sky, right? He said, I give you this rainbow in the sky as a perpetual reminder to you of my promise about the future of men and animals. The rainbow will appear wherever it rains to remind people of my promise never again to destroy the earth by a flood, verses 11 and 14. You see, the rainbow is that tangible evidence of God's promise, not destroy the world. Question. What is this promise about? Was it about not destroying the world? Or was it about having a trusting relationship? Wasn't it about the trust, the relationship God had, the commitment of God's to Noah, that commitment he made? Now look at Exodus 12, where the Israelites are getting ready to leave Egypt. I think you mentioned that in Sabbath school today too. They're getting ready to leave Egypt, and the last plague that came upon them was the death of the firstborn. You remember that? And God made an escape for the Israelites. He said, if you kill this lamb and firstborn, and you put the blood on the lintel and on the doorposts, then when the death angel flies over the land of Egypt, it will not stop in your house, and your firstborn will not be killed. Now notice in verse 13 it says, now the blood shall be a symbol on the houses where you are. And when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plagues shall not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. Now let me ask you, did the blood on the doorposts prevent the death of the firstborn? Not the blood itself, right? But the blood represented that I believed in God. I trusted in him in this relationship. And by me putting that blood on there, that trust relationship is what saved the firstborn. It was like raising a flag in Egypt land saying, I'm a believer in the Yahweh, the only God. But to deny the symbol would bring death, because to deny the symbol would deny the relationship. Are you following me? To deny the symbol is to deny the relationship. God gave us that symbol. Now, one more story. Just kind of see how this works. Joshua 2. You remember Joshua 2? Joshua finally takes over the reins, and Moses has died. And now Joshua is going to lead the people of Israel into the promised land. And before he does, he sends 2 spies, right, into the land, and especially the Jericho. When they go to Jericho, you know what took place. They went to the Jericho, and they went to Rahab, the prostitute's house, because they hoped not to be noticed. Men go to prostitute's house all the time. They hope, I won't be noticed if I go there. So they went to that house, and somebody's noticed them, though, and said, hey, 2 strangers, look like Israelites, are in town, to the king. And so the king went to Rahab and said, bring those men out that are in your house. And, of course, she told a fib here. She said, well, they're not really here. They already left, because she had hidden them. And even though they searched the house, she had taken them up on the roof and covered them up. And then after everybody was gone and went out looking for them, she said they left. They went out looking for them. She sent them away to the hills to hide for 3 days until it was safe. But she said this, I heard about you guys. I heard about the children of Israel. I knew that God has given you this land. We all know that. We all know we're doomed. She said, so because I showed you kindness, would you save me and my household? And they said, sure, we will. But you have to have all your household, your kids, your mother and father, everybody in your house. If they go out, we can't promise their life. But if they stay in your house, we promise. But here's what you have to do. What do you have to do? You have to let down what? A scarlet cord. The same one you let us down so we could get away in. You let that down. When we start to surround the city, you let that scarlet cord down. And if you do, we make a binding oath to you that you and your household would be saved. That's significant, isn't it? A binding oath. So that's what happened. And when it fell, she was saved. Now, was she saved because of the red cord? No, she was saved because of that relationship she had with those individuals. And the cord being let down is that she believed and trusted in their God. She believed and trusted in their oath that they had made to her. And to deny that symbol would also be destruction to her household. In the same way, the Sabbath is a special symbol given to us by God to represent our relationship with Him. And once you understand that, once you get the idea and understand the Sabbath is a symbol of my relationship, then to deny that symbol is to deny the Savior. Once you understand it. Are you tracking with me? Ezekiel talks about that, doesn't it? Moreover, I gave them my Sabbath to be a sign between them and me, that they may know that I am the Lord who, what? Sanctifies them, to set them aside, that they may know that I've chosen you. I've set you aside to be holy. It was me who did that. Now drop down to verse 20. Hallow my Sabbaths. They shall be a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord your God. Again, he wants us to know there's a relationship between the Creator and the creature, and our commitment to Him as a sanctifier, as somebody who set us aside for this holy purpose of being His children. Oh, what manner of love is this, that we shall be called children of God. That's where your value comes from. And because of the value, we go back to our roots and how this world was created, 6 in 1, and we experience this rhythm of life that God gave us for our benefit as a symbol of God's relationship with us, of our value and our worth to Him, that our lives are not about doing. Our lives are not about performance. Our lives are about living with our Father, Jesus Christ. It's about we are children of God, and He's our dad. And soon He's coming back to take us home. Let me close by noticing some unique values in the Sabbath as a sign. Just a few of them. Sabbath as time is so unique. You see, time is tangible. You say, well, wait a minute. I can't touch time. Well, but you can. Time is tangible. You know how I know it? Today I looked at my Facebook. Anybody look at Facebook? Anybody love no? Anybody love Facebook memories? Yeah. I love the memories, you know. I've been on Facebook quite a while. And every day a new memory comes up. And you go back to when you know, I went back and there was my little granddaughter who's now 12 going on 18. and I see her laying on my couch as a baby, 1 year old. And I say, oh, wow, what a memory. I love the time is tangible. You can see it as it passes. You look back, you can see time. It's uniquely tangible. Time is also well-defined. It's a symbol that's well-defined. The Sabbath is the seventh day, not any day. It's the seventh day. Have you heard someone say all days are the Sabbath? Because all days are God's days? But that's like saying this job is everybody's job. What happens if this job is everybody's job? The job doesn't get done. It's when you know it's your job, that's when it gets done. In the same way, every day is not the Sabbath. The Sabbath is defined. The seventh day, it's His rhythm, 6 in 1, 6 in 1. Not just any rope hung out of her window would do. It had to be the scarlet rope that she helped them out of her house. Rahab helped them out of the house. Not just any blood sprinkled from any lamb on any old doorpost on any day would do. It had to be a specific lamb, not just of any age, that was killed on a defined time and sprinkled on the doorpost. Time is also universal. This is an ideal symbol because the sun goes down. Everywhere you go, it goes down and brings a Sabbath on schedule. Due to circumstances out of our control, the sun sets. Did you try to stop it? Once it got stopped by Joshua. That's the only time I know anybody was able to stop the sun. But God did that to answer His prayer. It goes down specifically, goes and comes, goes. The Sabbath arrives on time every week. We literally get sunset calendars. We can know the time. And when the sunset calendar comes, guess what? Every year it's the same. The sun goes down right on time and it comes up. Time is incorruptible. If I had a flag, if I said this flag, I'm a Seahawks fan. Forgive me, but I'm a Seahawks fan. And my flag is the 12 flag. You know what I'm saying? Being 12, only guys who understand football understand that, the 12. Okay? But that 12 flag could be torn off that pole and trampled and burned, right? By someone else. The Trojans have a Trojan in front, and sometimes UCLA comes and they used to paint that Trojan. It was their symbol. And so now they tape it up so it can't be painted and they guard it, But that's not the same, you see, because time is incorruptible, not like a flag, not like the Trojan. You can't steal it, you can't burn it, you can't desecrate it, you can't paint it. God chose the Sabbath as an incorruptible time, but it is a symbol of his relationship with us. And then again, time is personal. We are personally responsible for how we use our time. We are personally responsible to make a choice. Do we honor God? Do we become his children? Do we choose? He chose us already. He chose us. He's redeemed us. Everybody's been redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Are you going to choose to become his children or not? And if you do become his child, are you going to fly the flag that symbolizes our relationship with him? The Sabbath, 6 and 1, 6 and 1. You alone can decide that. And so my hope and my prayer as I close is this. May we choose to enter the rest of God. 6 and 1, 6 and 1. May we experience the freedom of a relationship with God where we no longer find our value in our performances and in our accomplishments, but we rest in him because we already know we are his children. And may we find our value and our worth rooted in our Creator and Redeemer, Jesus Christ. And finally, may this simple symbol of the Sabbath, rooted and defined by time, be valued and honored by us because of this relationship we have with him. Amen.